All right, we are back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast, talking New York Jets at the NFL Draft coming up this week. Joining me today is the guy who covers them for Newsday. Iannazzone is here. Al, how are you?
Good, Mike. How you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. And I got to say, I'm a Jet fan myself. This offseason is very interesting. What do you think about what Joe Douglas has done for the Jets this offseason?
Well, I think he addressed some needs, obviously. When you look at the defensive line, that was actually one of the strengths, I thought, from last year's team with Quinnen Williams. Foley Fatukasi had a pretty good season. Now you're finally adding an edge rusher in Carl Lawson. And, I thought Sheldon Rankins was a good pickup. Because the defensive line, obviously, look, every position is important, but the defensive line is very important in Robert Saleh's defense. So I thought they did a good job there. Obviously, a couple of receivers, Corey Davis being the big one. You got to get your quarterback as many weapons as possible. I don't think they addressed the offensive line or the cornerback position enough. And, that's something obviously they can do in the draft or when the draft is over. If they didn't feel like they got what they wanted, then maybe they could sign a couple of guys on the cheap and see what happens. But to me, the biggest move obviously was the quarterback situation. We knew Sam Darnold was on borrowed time. I know there was the chance that he could return with the new coaching staff, but I always felt like they would go in a different direction, bring in their own guy, try to build from, the beginning, mold him into the way they want him. And clearly that's what they did.
Yeah, I want to touch on the quarterback situation too, because obviously that was a trade it felt like they had to make. I mean, there were, as you said, there were definitely logical arguments to make to keep Sam Darnold, but in terms of financials and in terms of timeline, it made more sense to move on from him. Like, do you think this was the best, like a win-win scenario for both sides here? Because not only the Jets get to reset at quarterback, but Sam ends up in a place where he can have a coach who believes in him, have more weapons, have a better line, all that.
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to see how it plays out, because obviously right now there's smoke screens everywhere when you're talking about, the week of the draft. I'm seeing rumors and reports that, Carolina could take a quarterback at number 8. Well, if you take a quarterback, and why'd you just trade for a guy who was the number 3 pick? So, I do think Sam is in a better situation. Obviously, you look, they got McCaffrey, they got his old pal, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. They have more talent on offense than the Jets had. And I thought that was a failing, and I'm not of the Jets organization, that when they got Sam Darnold, they didn't get the right guys around him. And it wasn't just Mike McCagnon. I mean, Joe Douglas did his best last year. Last year was all about the offensive line, but I didn't think the weapons were the right weapons. They let Robbie Anderson walk, and Rashad Perriman came in, and that didn't work out due to injury. And I don't think the offensive line lived up to the hype after, Jets spent all that money and the draft rebuilding. I mean, they got a nice player in Mekhi Becton. I think everybody likes the fact that he's going to be the left tackle for a lot of years. But if you're bringing in now, and I'm sure we'll get to this, if you're bringing in a rookie quarterback, you got to make sure you take care of him the way you didn't take care of Sam Darnold. I go back, Sam was the number 3 pick in 2018. The rest of the draft of 2018, not one offensive lineman and not one wide receiver was picked by the Jets. You go to 2019, only Chuma Edoga in the 3rd round was picked by the Jets, a tackle. Again, one offensive lineman, no receivers. They didn't do enough to help Sam.
Yeah, even comparison to what they did for Mark Sanchez back in 2009. He had a great running game. He had a great offensive line. They traded for Brendan Edwards and Santonio Holmes. They gave him a chance. That this regime didn't do enough. And I think Joe Douglas would admit that for his part, he didn't make enough things to help Sam.
Yeah, no, that's true. And, I mean, he did in terms of the offensive line. That was the focus last year. And I think everybody thought they made some, pretty good moves. I mean, both years, I think Joe Thuney was high on their list. They couldn't get him. But the weapons standpoint, look, Le'Veon Bell just didn't work out here. I think everybody thought that, he would be better than he was. I know Adam Gase got a lot of blame for not using him the right way. And there were times I felt that, I felt that he didn't use him the right way. And I thought once he went to Kansas City, you would see a little more. And he didn't have big games there either. So, that situation just didn't obviously work out. And then, again, the receiver standpoint, I thought he did a good job getting Denzel Mims. I think we all can agree. A lot of talent there. If he stays healthy, he could be a really good receiver. but they let Robbie Anderson walk, and it wasn't really for that much money. So, that proved to be a mistake. You want to make sure your quarterback is comfortable and has the pieces around him, and he had good chemistry with Robbie Anderson. I thought that was a mistake letting him go.
Yeah, it makes some sense. A lot of talk about the draft more. Obviously, the draft is this week, and it feels like the Jets are an interesting spot because for a long time they've been chasing picks because they've been trading picks away for things to try help them win right away. Joe Douglas has gone back more that Bill Parcells, like Mangini era Jets philosophy where, like, let's just stockpile our picks to us on more chances to find players to help us. I think that's a refreshing change of pace for them.
Yeah, I mean, you look at last year's draft, and I think Joe got more right than wrong. And that was his first draft. He came in 2019 after the draft. Mike McCagnon had done the drafting that year. So, having 10 picks in this draft, that's a lot, obviously. That's pretty good, and that gives you the flexibility to do whatever you want, whether it's, trade 2 to move up, trade something to grab a pick next year maybe that you want because some of the guys may not come out this year. You see how many players did not sign with agents, so they have the opportunity to go back to school now. I obviously think, with what was going on last year, 0-11 to start, I believe, 0-12. I can't even remember now. There's so many losses that, dealing some of these players away for picks, to do the right thing with Steve McClendon or with some of these other guys, that's going to pay dividends now. I mean, the Jamal Adams deal, this is when it's going to start paying dividends with the picks they have. I mean, they have a second first-round pick this year and next year. If you can use that to move up or to get somebody, maybe an established player, you do it. And that's what Joe wanted to do, and that's what he needs to do. Look, you say you're a Jet fan. They have not made the playoffs in 10 years, They were 2-14 last year. It was one of the worst records, worst seasons in franchise history. They don't have just one hole. They have many, many holes that they need to fill. And the more players, the more assets, the more flexibility, the more picks, you're going to be able to improve quicker. And, that's what this week is going to be about, obviously.
Yeah, and obviously this week starts at number 2 when they can take a quarterback. And unless Joe Douglas and the Jets pull in the biggest con-outs of all time, it's going to be Zach Wilson from BYU being the guy here. So what do you think about that decision? Because it feels like such a rapid rise for a guy who, like, most of us never heard of before this year even started. Yeah,
that's what everybody says. If you think about, if you want to say concerns, that was one that, he basically came out of nowhere. Another one is that they didn't play the best competition. But, sometimes you got to take a chance. I mean, I think that they love his arm strength. There's some people who say he has a better arm than Trevor Lawrence, especially with the different angles he could throw at. I've seen some comparisons, made by me. Let's make some comparisons to Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, the way he's able to move and make plays happen. Again, it's totally different competition because he's not doing it in the NFL and he's not doing it for one of the big five or whatever. But the thing, if there's one thing that you have to like is that the system that they used is similar to the system that the new Jets offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur is bringing in. I spoke to the BYU coach last week, his offensive coordinator, quarterback coach Aaron Roderick, and he said, there are two teams we studied a lot and we used a lot. One was the Chiefs and one was the 49ers. So, I mean, that's going to help his transition. But again, I go back to what I said earlier. Got to get the guy help. Got to improve the line. Got to get him more weapons.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. As far as the concerns about him coming out of nowhere, you could have said the same thing about Joe Burrow last year. And granted, he's playing at a higher level at the SEC, but he looked pretty good when he played for the Bengals last year.
I thought so too, and that's a good comparison. And then I've heard people say this, and I agree with it, that Josh Allen played at Wyoming, and look how he's played in the NFL. It all comes down to makeup of the person and player, the coaching staff, and how they develop them, and the talent around. Those are the three biggest factors, in my opinion, on how, whether a guy makes it, and especially in such a tough market here. I mean, again, we're going to keep saying the same stuff. They haven't made the playoffs in forever. They have only made it to one Super Bowl. I mean, Jet fans but not only Jet fans, ownership of the Jets, the Johnsons, they're craving for success. That's putting a lot of pressure on this kid. But by all accounts, he seems like he can handle it. And let me go back one second. I thought Sam Darnold did a pretty good job in terms of handling everything that was put on his plate because he received a lot of praise in the beginning, then criticism. He dealt with the mono, he dealt with all the losing. You could see it was wearing on him, but he handled himself a lot better than probably most kids who are 21, 22, 23. Now they're obviously hoping the same thing with Zach Wilson. However, I think they're going to be in a better position because I think the coaching staff is going to be stronger. And you need a good support staff. I mean, obviously we can all agree now that, Adam Gase was not the right guy for the Jets and he wasn't the right guy for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more interesting spot for them is at 23 because they have a lot of options there. They could stay put and take someone. They could trade up for a couple of spots. They see a guy that slide and they could trade down. How do you think that Joe Douglas could play as at 23?
Yeah, I think you have to wait and see how the board plays out. If we talked to Joe Douglas about this the other day, when you look at 23 and 34, I mean, those are two good spots to be in, obviously. Do you address needs? Do you help your quarterback? Do you do one of both? Do you do one of each? Do you take best available play? How do you do it? I mean, and I would say if there's an edge rusher there that you're absolutely in love with, or you can move up to, then get him with Robert Saleh, and you can get a difference maker on the line and put him opposite, Carl Lawson, then get him. If that's Greg Rousseau or Azeez Ojulari, whoever it may be. They also need a cornerback. And I don't think that, the main guys are going to drop. I don't think Surtain is going to drop, and I don't think J.C. Horn will drop. But you might be in position to get a Newsome or Caleb Farley, and are they healthy? I mean, those are the two biggest concerns with those guys. Or do you go offensive line? Do you go running back to put somebody in, a better running back for Mike LaFleur's system, and you give Zach another weapon? There's just so many ways they can go, and that's what's going to be interesting here because I do think there's going to be a lot of movement, especially with the Jets. 10 picks. They're not trading the number 2 unless something crazy happens. But the 9 other picks, I would say all options are on the table, and anything could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would consider it more like a not that if someone they like, especially on the offensive line, because Joe Douglas's bread and butter starts sliding down to maybe 19 or 20, it wouldn't kill them to trade a 4 or something and move up a couple of slots and make sure they get the guy they want.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a guy, Vera Tucker from USC is a guy that, could come in and obviously you want to improve the interior of the offensive line. He could do that. But there are also some tackles that might be there. And I know you say, okay, well, you got Mekhi Becton, and that's great. But maybe you put a tackle on the other side of them that's going to be here for years. So, again, they know more than we do when it comes to how they're ranking the players and the conversations with them and all the medicals. But I would be surprised if, one of those picks, 23 and 34, one of them wasn't an offensive lineman. I'd be very surprised.
Yeah, I would too. I think people are kind of sleeping on the value the Jets can get at 34 as well, because that's basically the equivalent of a late first-round pick there that they have. And now you're talking about adding potentially 3 starters to your team at with 2, 23, and 34. That's a very good situation for the Jets to be in. Absolutely. And that's what they need to be in. I mean, 2 and 14. And let's think about this. The fans are going to be back this year. I know Roger Goodell said, by the end of the season, at some point in the season, it's going to be full. I'd love to see that. Obviously, I'd love to see that because it means we're back to normal. But can you imagine what MetLife Stadium would have been like last year with the way, the Jets were playing, what they would have been doing to Adam Gase, what they would have been doing to Sam Darnold? So, you have to put together a team now that's going to perform, and you can't have a duplicate of last year. Now, I don't think they will because obviously, they made some moves in the offseason already. That's helping them. I think Zach Wilson is going to get a little bit of a pass early on. I know there's no patience in New York. I mean, I understand that. I'm a sports fan. You want to see your team win one right away, but when you have a rookie quarterback, you do have to like you said, you have to reset a little. You have to give it a little time. And you got to make sure you got all the pieces around them. But this is an opportunity for the Jets to really, really improve
and how much they improve, we'll see, and we'll see how the coaches, do, because I think we all agree too that Robert Saleh didn't really have that much this year in San Francisco on the defensive side of the ball because of all the injuries they had, and they still were a pretty good, formidable defense. That makes you think, this guy is going to be able to get the most out of his players. So that's the part that I'm sure Jet fans are excited about. That you add some fresh talent, and you add a new coach and new staff, and they really seem hungry. Let's see what it turns into in a year or two.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last question is, obviously, you've talked about they had the longest playoff drought in the NFL. They haven't made the playoffs since 2010, and no one's expecting them to go this year. Going from 2-14 to playoffs would be quite the leap, but I feel like they've gotten better with talent-wise. I feel like this is a team where you look at it and you say, like, if they're not winning at least 6-7 games and sort of set themselves up to be in contention in 22, then you have to start worrying a little bit.
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent, but you also have to, again, with a rookie quarterback, how many games was Cincinnati going to win with Joe Burrow? They weren't going to win. And, Carl Lawson's on the other side of the ball there too. I think they're on the rise. I think that's the only place they can go is up. But 2022, you got to be in the mix for the playoffs at the very least. Hopefully this year they're a relatively competitive team for Jet fans. But again, it's all going to be about the growth and the development of the players, because you got a lot of young players on this team. There's some veterans. They brought in some veterans, but you're going to have a lot of young players because they got rid of a lot of veterans. And as we continue to say here, you got 10 draft picks. Now, not all of them are going to play, and probably not all of them are going to be selected, because I do think they're going to make a deal at some point. But, the biggest thing, and I'm just going to keep saying it, make sure that Zach Wilson has enough weapons, has the protection he needs. Don't make the mistake the organization made with Sam Darnold, again, with Zach Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be a key for them in the draft this week. Al, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how can people follow you on social media and keep up with your coverage of the Jets and Newsday?
Go to Newsday.com, and if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Al_Iannazzone, IANNAZZONE. Mike, thank you very much for it.
All right, Al, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care.